You're between two dumbbells. I'm your host, Skip Hill, and I'm bringing over 40 years of bodybuilding experience to the table, including over 24 years of online coaching. I'm joined today by Dr. Marv, or you might know him by his alias, the educated meathead, and thankfully he's bringing his big brain to the project. For each show, we posit a thought about a training exercise or training methodology, and we take a deep dive into the minutia. We argue and debate, but we might also pull hair, break a nail, kick off our flip-flops while yelling, "Oh, no, you didn't." But when the dust settles, we make up, and we both decide if we would smash or pass. Not each other, but the topic. Don't forget that we will also be doing another segment of Intimate Time with Skip and Dr. Marv after the main topic, and then we will finish, as always, with a few listener questions, which are typically, though not always, related to a past show. Remember, every time you comment on the show on YouTube, you'll be included in a drawing at the end of the month to receive a Team Skip t-shirt of your choosing from the teamskip.com store, and you'll receive Dr. Marv's online bodybuilding anatomy course. Of course, your comment on YouTube needs to be more than just for the algo, or maybe the muscle arm, to be considered for the monthly drawing. We'll post the winner for the month on my Intense Muscle Instagram account, and we'll also reach out to the winner via their YouTube account. I think we need to dive in, Dr. Marv. Can I take the posit?
Absolutely.
I posit that the Incline Barbell bench press sucks. I was thinking of a better word.
All right, going straight there, huh?
Yeah, I couldn't come up with that. I'm not. Here's the thing. I don't want to give away my smash or pass because you may bring up information during the debate where I go, okay, I can concede that. But as it stands right now, with my 41 years of training experience, it's a lot of time in the gym. I mean, that's we had like rocks for weights with holes drilled into them.
Yeah. I mean, it was Brontosaurus burgers, right, for protein.
Exactly. It was a tough time. It was a tough time, Dr. Marv. So in my years of training, I'm not a fan. I forced the exercise on that high. I call it a high incline. I think anything 45 degrees and higher is just high. You might as well consider it a front delt press as far as I'm concerned. Now, maybe you'll talk me off the ledge. Maybe at the end of our debate, I'll be like, okay, I still think it sucks, but it doesn't suck as bad as I thought it did when we started the discussion. What are your thoughts?
So I think we could clarify it further in Tweak the Posit, saying the incline free barbell press is not a great upper chest builder for everyone. It's probably less. How do I say that? It's not a great upper chest builder for more folks than it is a great upper chest builder.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And largely it's due to your structure, right? So for you and I, because I know we're going to talk about rib cage and sternum, it's a front delt move, but some of the greatest chests of all time, they swear by it. Again,
some of the greatest chests of all time come with very broad, very wide shoulders. Everybody can see my shoulders. They're this wide. I think my mom named me Ken after the doll. I swear it. I swear she named me after the doll, which I'll have to check and see which one came first. Me in 1970 or the Ken doll.
Yeah. That'll be good. Yep. So why are we saying probably not for most? I think it makes the most sense to do just a real quick research summary and then talk about how I approach it, how you approach it, as well as what I think is the greatest upper chest builder, which is going to be a very controversial statement. A lot of people are going to probably scream. So that'll be fun. So if you look at the research, it does seem that an incline angle hits the upper chest. We know that. So there's a couple studies I want to bring up in particular. So one study, they did 5 different bench angles, flat, 15, 30, 45, and 60. And then they measured the EMG. Remember, there's limitations to that. There's limitations with all these studies I'm citing. So what is evidence-based? It's research, anecdote, and preference. So we're going to really lean into the anecdote and preference. But they measured upper pecs, middle and lower pecs, front delt, and tricep. And they found that 30 degrees actually had the most amount of upper pec. So I guess I should digress. Pec, there's actually 3 parts of your pec. So you have these fibers that run this way. These are called your clavicular fibers, and they have a separate nerve innervation. Then you have the meat of your pec. The fibers are following my fingers this way, right? That's your middle pec. And then you have your lower pec. Some people want to be really fancy and call it the costal pec. That goes right here. So it is one of the few muscles where, yes, it's such a different shape and architecture that you really do need to prioritize different parts of it. A lot of people will make the same connection with lats. Different strokes, different folks. I definitely did like thoracic lats and lumbar lats and iliac lats to try and sound smart, but in reality, yeah. But chest is different in that absolutely you do need to hit it from multiple angles because some fibers are going up, some fibers are going across, and some fibers are going down. So in that study, they found 30 degrees actually had the most amount of activity where we want it, that sternoclavicular portion. 60 degrees was the most front delt on that, which we would both say overhead pressing is front delt. And if you want to know about middle delts, refer back to our first ever episode. In another study, now this one was cool because actually this kind of applies more to us because it was actually done on classic bodybuilders who had to be competing for at least 5 years. That is incredibly rare. And they measured pec major, upper, middle, lower, front delt, middle delt, and the long head of the triceps. And they did, and I'm looking at my notes, a flat bench press, a 45-degree bench press with a bar, a decline bench press, and then a chest press machine. What was interesting is they didn't really clarify which type of chest press machine, so I am assuming it is a seated. Like I read the whole study on Sci-Hub this morning, and I couldn't really find the explanation, but whatever. The upper pec was in their study most active at 45-degree incline and least active. Remember, it's this part in the machine chest press, which makes sense. Middle and lower pec was most active in the flat and the decline. We know that. Triceps was most active in the flat and the decline. And as we would expect, front delt, interior delt, most active in the incline, least active in the decline. And a lot of other studies repeat this, right? Where as the angle goes up, we increase upper pec, but you also increase front delt versus flat. So there's one other study we'll reference when it comes to what about you do with your hands if you want to do, an underhand grip, but we'll talk about it in a sec. So the takeaway is, yes, in research, it seems like 45 degrees is upper, but you and I both said, no, it's not. So here's where everybody's structure comes into play, and we've talked about it before. So this is your rib cage. This is your sternum. Ken and I have a sternum that is pretty damn like vertical or perpendicular, straight up and down to the floor. So for us, anything over 15-30 degrees is going to be all front delt, which is why Skip and I will both say an incline barbell bench press, that traditional 45-degree angle is absolutely trash for us. People who love that angle, think about Arnold, Jay Cutler, Ronnie, whoever else raves about incline barbell benching. They have an incredibly steep sternal angle where theirs is like a 45-degree angle versus you and I are more vertical. You have that rib cage, guess what? You're probably gonna have a pretty damn good chest.
Let me ask you this question. As I'm kind of listening to you speak as a listener.
Yep.
And as a listener, I would wonder this. You're speaking when you say about the sternum, you're talking about the actual rib cage, not the size of the pectorals, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And I think that's important because I was beginning to think as you were speaking, well, maybe he's talking about the bigger that you get and the more pectoralis muscle tissue you're carrying, that angle could change. So I just wanted you to kind of clarify.
Yeah, so that's rib cage sternal angle independent of musculature. Most people who have these God's gifts of chest, their rib cage is incredibly steep and really broad with really broad shoulders because that gives it leverages, blah, blah, blah. So if you're blessed with that, then yes, an incline barbell bench press on the traditional 45-degree angle is great. I find that is the exception rather than the rule. Most people are like you and I, where we need a lower angle, like that first study found, where 30 degrees was more activation than 45 degrees. And then so one last thing, and then we'll have a discussion. Another issue I have with just barbells in general is your pecs, one of its main job is to bring your arm across. Well, I am locked in, so I cannot really get that. It's called adduction, AD. I'm adding to my midline, that fully shortened position, right? And then we left talked about something called active insufficiency, but let me hear your thoughts before I start bringing up that concept.
Well, I'm a little bit surprised, only by my own experience in the gym for so long, that the 30-degree angle showed the most activity, I guess, for that opportunity. I expected it to be 15, only because in my particular situation, that lower 15 degrees it's a grand slam for me. Now, I will concede that 30 to 45 is night and day. That literally, if I take those two angles, 45 does not work. 30 can deal with it. Now, between 30 and 15, I can deal with both, but I will absolutely go 15 all day long. And I've actually gotten questions on it in the gym because people will see it and say, are you doing upper chest when you do that? Why do you have such a low incline? And then I bitch at them and tell them to get away from me, that I don't have the time. I don't have the time to explain this crap. Not really. I'm actually a nice guy in the gym. And I do answer questions in between sets. But that low incline, when you look at it, you go, your brain kind of tells you that's not high enough. But that feel for me and on the flip side, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole of front delt training, because got to stay on topic. I have a problem with that. But you'll see a picture right here, the high incline that is slightly back. That is my angle, and it is a money angle for dumbbell pressing. It will destroy my front delts, where most people, maybe they can go almost straight up. Well, what I like to do too is let my shoulders hang over the back of like a preacher bench. I turn around and do dumbbell presses on that. But I digress. Back to the chest training. I guess my point in saying that about the front delts is everybody's going to be a little bit different, and to base the best angle for you on what it feels like, not what we're telling you. Well, I mean, you can pretty much almost get rid of the 45 degree or anything higher for that matter. Back in the day, when I started in the 80s, there were
like 55 degrees.
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it might even have been higher than that. It was just ridiculous. And then they would have the combination of the decline and the incline. So they had to put it into one piece. You just had to flip up the seat at the bottom or flip it down, depending on what you were doing. But it was arguably too steep for an incline. Then you turn around and it was way too deep for a decline too. So it did take the fitness industry or the equipment manufacturing industry quite a few years to actually get a lot of this equipment right. And I don't think they started doing that probably until hammer strength. Maybe not hammer strength. Icarian and Cybex were good. I don't want to take it. But that original equipment from like the 70s and into the 80s, it really wasn't mechanically sound at all.
No, yeah. And like we've made huge advancements and we understand a lot more. So once again, though, like what I teach people is feel your sternum. Is it perpendicular to the floor like you and I? That means low incline is your money. So yes, for me, 15 degrees is my preferred incline angle, just like you. Occasionally I will do, when I used to do free weights, I haven't free weight pressed in 4 years. We'll talk about that later, why. But yeah, for me, 15 to 30 is my sweet spot. Flat and a baby decline is great for me for my lowers, right?
Same.
Yep. So we'll do that. Now, there is a concept we've talked about a few times called active insufficiency. And for the most part, it doesn't matter unless you have a lagging body part, because what happens with lagging body parts? They're typically surrounded by your gifted body parts, right? So if you look at me, I look at a weight, my delts grow. Right?
I wish I
Like,
had that problem.
yeah, correct. So I did the 45 degree, what does everybody do? Incline first, then a fly, then a flat, right? I did that for the first 8 or 9 years of my training career. And shoulders got massive. I literally had like a negative chest. It was a terrible look. So you've got to keep in mind when a muscle crosses two joint, they're called biarticular. And if they're getting shortened on both sides, the muscle can become so short that it cannot do what it needs to do to continue to create tension. I'm simplifying this, right? So it's unable to create a ton of tension. Once again, active insufficiency probably doesn't matter unless you're not God's gift, which is 98.999% of people listening to this, or you have a lagging body part. So your upper chest, your sternoclavicular fibers, these that go like this, they deal with active insufficiency once your shoulder goes from about 90 to 120 degrees of flexion. So everybody's going to be different. So for me, 45 degree, that's in that range. And yeah, it's going to be all front delt. So if you have a lagging body part, if you're doing, the low to high flies like we've talked about, or you're figuring out your bench angle, you do not want your arm to be anywhere from 90 to 120 degrees of flexion. That is a wide range. That's 30 degrees. So you're going to have to play around with it. For me, I found I could go to about here. So my upper arm's just past 90 and I'm good. If I go any higher, I don't feel any more tension in my pec. It's just my front delt. So for me, I need to avoid that. So the upper, and guess what? This part of the chest and this part of the chest doesn't deal with that. Only the upper. Yep. So that's another thing you need to keep in mind. Is if you have a lagging chest, especially this upper body part, I bet you're doing movements where the front delt is taking over. So it sounds weird because, this full team range of motion thing's big. You might not want to go all the way up high. You want to keep it to where the pec's the primary mover.
Agreed. Now, I don't want to get ahead of myself, so slow me down if you don't want to go in this direction. Even though the 15 to 30 degree incline bench works well for me, works well in the sense that the other angles just suck, I still don't consider that lower angle for an incline bench a great chest movement. I would rather do other exercises, arguably some machines, than that exercise. Now, am I getting ahead of myself? Because I can stop and come back to it.
You mean just barbell benching in general?
Yes. Now, I'm still not a big fan of it because of the limited range of motion. The other thing that it does too is, you touched on it earlier about the adduction. That all you have to do is hold your hands at the top of a bench, whether it's flat, decline, or anything else, and you can clearly see that you're missing half of the range of motion. It's just not an exercise for a lot of range of motion. Now, is full range of motion the end all? I mean, we could argue that cable flies could give you the best range of motion, but are they, at the top of the list for building mass? It comes down to what you have talked about, quite a bit, which matters, and that is the stability, of the exercise as well. Not a big fan for that. I love the exercise, but I'm not going to program a cable fly as a primary. I call them growth sets, or growth exercises. I would use it as an opener and often do. Don't like to close with isolation when the isolation is focused on kind of that massive contraction. I will end with a dumbbell fly in a stretch position. I think that's great. But I lose so much contractile force as I move through working that specific muscle group, whether it's chest, legs, or anything else, that I want to take advantage of the contractile force being strong and open with those. And we touched on that in the last episode, actually, in depth. That contraction and that stretch, moving through a full range of motion to open, is arguably the better move for opening exercises for muscle groups. So I ask you, do you have other exercises? Do you rank the incline bench up there with one of the better movements?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what Skip's referring to is as a muscle fatigues, we lose its ability to get to a maximally shortened position. There's a bunch of stuff going on both in the nervous system and at the muscular system. So if you are somebody who you consider yourself advanced and you actually prioritize shortened, mid-range, and lengthened position movements, you would want to do a shortened position movement first because your ability to generate peak contractile force is when you're freshest. So I completely agree with that. Let me bring up one other study when it talked about what happens as hands come narrow and if you're pronated palm down versus supinated underhand. And then we'll talk about upper chest exercises. I'm going to bring back an old school one from the 1940s that most people are going to be appalled that I brought it up. I actually refused to show it online for the first 16 years of my career. And then I finally caved and showed it like 6 months ago. So we'll have to do that again. But one other study, now it wasn't ideal, so there's a lot of limitations. But another question people get is, well, what if I, underhand, that'll be upper chest, right? So not a perfect study, but it's the one we have where they did isometric holds of 5 different bench exercises. They did wide, middle, and narrow. As you would expect, from wide to narrow increased tricep activation, right? And decreased the upper pec. However, underhand increased bicep activation, and it did increase this upper pec fiber things in an isometric. And as you got super close doing an isometric with an underhand, you didn't see that force loss as well. So we could say potentially an underhand cable press could be a really good upper chest movement.
Okay, what about front delt? Or did they not look at that?
So front delt's going to be doing that the whole time. Yeah, is going to be recruited. And it'll get even more recruited as you get a little bit narrower, which we already knew that. Yep. So again, it is isometrics only, but it gives you an idea. So yeah, incline bench, I very, very rarely program it. If I am going to do a bench, it's almost always on a Smith machine. For bodybuilding, general population, I don't program flat barbell bench at all. I know that disheartens all my powerlifter strongman, but we're talking about hypertrophy, general fitness, and the risk to reward ratio isn't there. Because what are 95% of all pec tears on? A flat barbell bench. Why? If you want, and this is going to be very counterintuitive what I'm about to show you, but in the history of pec tears, the rep they pop their pec or the reps leading up to it, that elbow starts to creep up, right? So you always want to keep that slightly elbow tucked position. So I typically don't do incline bench at all. However, there's a guy named Vince Gironda, the original steak and eggs diet guy. He was the OG. Yes, he gets a lot of hate. I'm like, he was coming up with stuff in the 40s and 50s before we had any sort of science. Like, he got stuff more right than wrong.
He was so far ahead of his time that I would have loved for him to have been born 40 years later.
Yes. We do this on, and I'm going to share my screen. I'm just getting the volume down. All right. So you need to respect this movement. This is not a max load movement. This is a finisher. This is not an opener. You're not progressive overloading it. You are not going to failure. But my single favorite that blew up my upper chest, especially the sternoclavicular fibers more than anything else, and I do it on a Smith machine. I used to do it on a free barbell when I had my training studio in my garage. But Vince Gironda's old school guillotine press is my favorite movement for upper chest. So it's called a guillotine because it's going to be coming down to my neck. As you could see, elbows are very wide, which goes against what I just said about pec tears. This is not a max load exercise. What I will do is I'll typically program a pause in that stretch position to make it extra spicy. 1 to 2 reps in reserve. The second set, you are not doing that pause in the stretch position. I will not let anybody load this more than 250, 275, absolutely maximum. They're doing at the end of a workout. But if you want the biggest stretch humanly possible, man, there's very few movements that are hard. But it is putting the shoulder in a vulnerable position, so you need to respect it. Sometimes if my shoulders are feeling great, I could come all the way down and literally barely breast against my Adam's apple. Other times I'm stopping 3, 4, 5 inches short. It depends on how my torn shoulders are feeling that day. It has to be respected. You're not maximally loading it. Respect it, but you do that, it will absolutely blast this part, which is what you're trying to get with an incline bench.
I want to run with this because you've said a couple things that I feel very strongly about.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, you don't need the angle. I mean, you can literally stay on a flat bench and hit your upper chest. That's number one. That's important because, again, that line of push or that line, I don't know how to explain this, but with the bar coming down to the upper chest in the guillotine is a good example. I tend to think that part of the reason that the incline press or even an incline dumbbell press is from the side, what that line is of where that stress is. So when you're doing an incline, the line is going to hit or is in line with the upper chest, where when you're doing flat, it's in line with the lower chest. So I think this gets missed a lot by a lot of trainers. They just figure, well, it has to be on a higher incline and that automatically will take care of it. It may not take care of it all that much if you were to, as an example, be at an incline angle and the bar comes down to the bottom of the chest versus if you were to take it up to the collarbone. This is incredibly
we should have
important.
clarified this.
Yeah, yes. It's incredibly important information because it doesn't get discussed a lot. That's number one. Number two is this. I am a huge believer, and I will argue it with all the haters. I'll argue it with Paul. I'll argue it with powerlifters. But the reason I'll argue it with powerlifters is it's a very easy argument. Powerlifting pressing and bodybuilding pressing are two very different things mechanically, very different. So as you said, with the pec tears, that a lot of them happen when the elbows are flared. But I think a big reason for that is they're not used to the elbows being flared, and they flare because they either can't control the weight or they lose the mechanics for a split second, and that's when it tears. I think if they're doing that movement with the elbows flared and they're used to doing that and the range of motion is there in the pec and in the shoulder, I don't think it's a vulnerability. And the reason I say this is because I've done it that way for years. I believe and will always believe that bodybuilding pressing of any kind, barbell bench, dumbbell press, hell on a machine, hammer strength is a good example. You need to, and I'm going to tell this to every client and every person that asks me, even with a hammer strength, those machines are made for the elbows to tuck for a couple reasons. That's why people love them. Because if you can't bench press 315, you can still get 3 plates on each side of the hammer strength, and you can tuck the hell out of those elbows and take a narrow grip, and you can get reps with it. They're crap. But if you drop that seat down and you keep the elbows flared, I'm even thinking of like a wide angle. One of my favorite hammer strength presses is the wide angle decline. And this is how I found out about it. I was training with Jimmy Kennedy when he would come home from his football season. When he was in the NFL 6 years. He would live in Denver and train with me in the off season. He was 6'5". So I had to make the adjustments that he needed on the machines that we were using work for me without constantly having to move them every set from him to me and me to him. And that's how I stumbled on it. I just got on it when the seat was all the way in the bottom position, and then I flared my, obviously I always have, but it forced my elbows. There was no way to tuck them anyway. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this feels even better than it did before and hits it is, of any machine for chest, that is my favorite machine. It will destroy my chest. And I rarely get above 3.5 plates, but very methodical, very, almost arguably perfect reps. I'm a mechanics guy. Thankfully, I've always been, because if I wasn't, I'd probably be done by now, I'm pretty sure, with a lot of injuries. So as far as the flare, I'm huge on that, provided you have that range of motion and you're used to training in that or with that style and with the elbows flared. And if you're not, and all of a sudden you change, if someone is listening, they go, oh, Skip said to flare my elbow, and you're going in and you're trying to use the weights you were before, you're just asking for trouble. It's there. And even if you get by with it, or you get around it and you don't have any problems, you could very soon. You need to break into that different range of motion, or that different mechanics very, very slowly and very, very carefully.
Yeah. So let me say one thing that a cue I don't think our listeners will know, but just in case, when you're doing a barbell bench, a cue I really find helpful is hand pressure. So as you're doing the negative, pull your hands out. That'll help keep your back engaged. And as you press up, picture bringing your hands in. They're not going to move, but that's going to add that adducting force. It's funny you brought up the decline hammer because, I wanted to ask you, what do you do if somebody comes to you with lagging chest as a body part? I'm going to do that chest adducting activation shrug we talked about last time. But then my first movement is that decline hammer, because I find people with dominant shoulders, you put them on an incline first, even if you're doing the right angle, their front shoulder's still going to want to take over because that's the neural pathway. But if I put you on a decline, which we know the research says, plus anecdotally we know, takes the front delt out of it. Yeah, if I could ever start somebody on a decline hammer, I actually was experimenting at a different gym where I was using yoga blocks to try and make a regular seated chest machine mimic a decline by pushing my hips forward and leaning back. And I think I'm onto something. I need to fine tune it a little bit more because I got, a couple clients or people doing my workout programs are like, I don't have a decline machine. And I'm like, oh, that's a bummer, because if you've got a lagging chest, that is my favorite way to start. I typically go the shrug to activate in between warm-up sets, decline hammer to an isolation movement, and then an upper chest movement, or just like a traditional flat angle. But I love the fact that you said that. Use yoga blocks when you're using hammer. So use yoga blocks. That'll help you a lot to save your shoulders and save your strength, so you're not starting in that vulnerable position, especially if you're not a 6'7" monster. So the low seat already has you way the hell up here. But I completely agree. 95% of people, you put that seat low on that machine, they'll be like, what the hell is this? Yep. My chest is working.
Now, what is a yoga block, and what do you mean by that? While you're looking for that, I've got a cue, or not a cue, but a hack for making the decline easy to get in and out of. And some people know, and some people already do it, but others go, oh man, I never thought of that. And it saves a lot of effort. What you do is you take little dumbbells, like the little 3-pound or 2-pound pink or purple dumbbells that are in the gym. You can always find them in the aerobics room if you can't find them on the weight floor. And what you do is, when you start with 145 on each side, you prop up with your shoulder the post that you're putting the weights on, and you put the dumbbell between the pad. You're basically raising the lever, and you're giving yourself another 4 inches. But wait, that's like 12 inches, right? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Anyway, another 4 inches to be able to get into the movement without having to fight to pull those, to pull the levers out of that bottom position. And once you bring them up, then of course those little light dumbbells, they just fall to the floor, and it's no big deal.
We are doing the same exact thing.
Is that what you're doing with the yoga blocks?
Yep.
Okay.
Here's a single arm isolateral wide, which I love as well, from Dante. But see, the yoga block drops off and you're good to go. And it doesn't make a super loud noise. You're going to raise less eyebrows doing that.
Good point. Yep.
This is a great chest movement as well. I learned it from Dante for getting like a massive stretch, and we never do unilateral chaining for chest. So I would,
good point.
If I have somebody with a lagging body part who's chest, I will put that towards the end of the workout, because like we've talked about, unilateral increases your brain's ability to recruit the muscle better via motor unit recruitment. So as you're already getting fatigued, it's a way to keep the stimulus super high, and you already have it full of blood, and I'm getting that massive freaking stretch on it. It's a great finisher. It is time consuming because you got to do one for each. I recognize that. But nobody ever does unilateral for chest. We'll do it for back. We'll do it for legs, but we never do it. We'll do it for shoulders, for arms, just never chest.
And if you have a home gym and you don't have dumbbells that are very heavy, keep those dumbbells in the bottom position, not in the top, and hold and do. And the isolateral, the cool thing with isolateral work in a situation like that is you're not going to increase the amount of weight you're using. What you're doing, though, is you're doubling the time under tension while you're training that muscle, because I'm telling you, if you normally do 120 pound, 130 pound incline dumbbell presses, you're going to be using maybe 70s, because you're going to think, oh, this isn't that bad. I could have probably gone up a little higher. And by the time you get to 5 or 6 reps, you're like, oh, bitch, this is not going to be easy to get to 10. You can always hold them in the top position. You hold it here, you do a rep. I find more stability by holding it in the bottom position. And especially when the dumbbells are heavier, because when they're at the top and you got one down, it's just kind of it doesn't feel, I guess, as stable as in the bottom position. And you have that constant tension, far more tension on the muscle at the bottom. Remember, we've said this many times, so I'm going to continue to say this as either a mantra or just sound like a broken record. But when the muscle is in that lengthened position, more fibers are firing. So if you have to hold that position, hold it in the stretch position, not in the contracted position.
Completely agree.
So if you have to pull, go ahead. Go ahead.
For a future topic, we will talk about unilateral, because I do my unilateral different than you, because I do not like alternating. I like doing all one at a time, but we'll save that for another day.
Oh yeah, we're on completely different pages.
Yes.
There. Yep. And it's not that one is more effective than the other. It's an OCD.
It's our individual OCD tendencies, 100%.
Yep. Exactly.
Because
you have the
yours
same
is
thing.
nails on a chalkboard to me, and mine is nails on a chalkboard to you.
Exactly.
So we will present our arguments in a future episode.
Okay, I do want to touch on, and I know that the Posit is the incline bench, but in doing that, we did decide too that okay, if we're not a big fan of this exercise, then what do we recommend? We don't want to smash something or not like something and then not give alternatives or other options. I am a huge fan of dumbbell flies. I think they're highly underrated. Part of the reason is because I don't have wide clavicles. So for me to hold in the top position, I don't lose much tension. If I were wider, maybe that would happen. Now, I don't want to say that at the top it feels like I'm holding a cable fly or a pec deck. And by the way, pec decks are very, very, they're becoming dinosaurs. They've almost become extinct. You cannot find them anymore, and I don't understand why. But anyway, the point being is that the dumbbell fly, to me, they work very, very well, and I can still hold a contraction in the top position. And if you can't, and if you're wider or whatever the makeup is of your shoulder rib cage setup, then just don't take them all the way, to get, you can stop that rep out in here to keep constant tension. That's fine. Alan Crest had a great idea years ago where he would just come to shoulder width and he would keep that constant tension on the outside. I like that. I think that's a great idea. Not terribly profound, like no one had thought, but at the same time I hadn't, so, and that's the difference. I can bring them damn near together, not touching, but I can bring them together and I can still hold that contraction in top position. And inclines are great. I mean, I have seen a lot of growth. And it was funny because it occurred to me, I'm like, this is maybe 10, 12 years ago. I'm like, I'm pressing a lot. I'm like, my strength is going up. I'm progressively getting stronger, but I don't see a change in my chest. And I thought, years ago, we used to do more dumbbell flies. So I went back to them. And I started progressing visually. The chest was just developing better, even though my pressing strength wasn't going up anywhere near as much as it was when I essentially had the same looking chest for 5 years. So I think it's a great movement. The neutral grip, of course, and we can get into the nuances of the mechanics, but I'm a big believer in the dumbbells only ending up slightly outside of that 90-degree angle. I don't like the super wide.
Yeah. So you're saying you're not here, you're there, so there's gravity still putting tension on the pec?
No, what I'm saying is in the bottom stretched position, we don't need them to be super wide. What we want is if this is 90, and when I say 90, the upper arm to the floor, okay, because I'm supposed to be lying down on a bench right now.
Yeah.
This is just outside of that 90. So from here to here. I don't think way out in here, I think it becomes, the further you get out, there's a huge vulnerability. And then you have that bottom 10, 15 degrees that is just brutal. And once you break that sticking point, then you're losing a lot of that tension. You're able to train it a little heavier as well when that angle is only slightly more open than 90. Plus, if you were to have a camera looking down on me while I'm lying on a flat bench, you'll see that the elbows will be in a deeper position with the arms slightly outside, or with the dumbbells slightly outside of 90 than if they were straight anyway, because you're limited by the straight. Arguably, you're limited by what? The bicep tendon, too? Because of the fact that it attaches over the shoulder. You put that in a bad position as well. So I like just outside of 90 degrees, and I think it's I don't think it's something you need to be doing, 8 reps with and going heavy with and focusing on, this is a growth set. But I think it's a great exercise either to pre-exhaust with higher reps before you press, or to go a little bit heavier, the 10, 12 range, if it's programmed deeper into your chest workout. You a fan or no?
I typically don't program dumbbell flies. I'll do cables or pec decks just because of continuous tension.
Okay.
But what you're saying, it's way less vulnerable doing it your way than the arm straight out. When, back in the day with Arnold, they're freaking practically scraping their knuckles on the ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But once again, though, massive chest and steep angle, so that still stayed on his bicep. If that works for you, great. I typically do cables and machines for continuous resistance profile. And I think you kind of mentioned it, but when you're doing a dumbbell fly, you don't want to go to where your upper arms parallel to or perpendicular to the ground, because there's no tension on your pecs. You want to stop slightly short, so slightly wider. So if people recall moment arms, the longer the moment arm, the harder it is. So I still want a little bit of tension on my pecs. I'll see people with dumbbells, or they'll even touch them together, and I'm like, now you're doing negative motion. So do whatever you can comfortably do in the bottom, and then do not always stop less of perpendicular floor. Always keep that tension on the pec.
When I first started, we had the Hex dumbbells, and I learned very, very quickly that you don't touch them on a dumbbell press, because little particles will end up in your eyeball and will scratch your eye, and you have to go to the doctor when you're 15 years old and explain what happened. So, and then I had someone smarter than me tell me, you don't need to touch them anyway. It's
like you're speaking from personal experience.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like I've learned a couple things over these last, few years, 40 years, I don't know. Anyway, so do we move to the smash or pass? Some of these are obvious, I think. Yeah. You want to take it first?
Yeah, so I am passing on incline barbell bench for more people than I am smashing. If you are gifted with a super steep sternal angle and massive rib cage, keep pressing away. But that is the exception, not the rule.
Massive pass. Even if it fits the rib cage, even if it's a good feel, not saying not do it. I'm saying I'm passing on it, because I think there are better movements. Dumbbell press, for one, is the most obvious. Just gives a better range of motion anyway. You arguably lose a third of the range of motion on a bench press. And that's an arbitrary number to make my point. I don't want anybody throwing a study at me going, no, it's actually 17.5. Whatever. Point is there's a loss of range of motion there, and I don't want to lose it. I want it to be. I'm an optimal guy. I want to optimize everything as much as possible. I'll still use them, but I'm going to do dumbbell presses, or I'm going to do flies. Cool. I'm going to transition us into the next segment then. This one's going to be fun, and I always like asking the questions versus answering.
Yeah. I'm on the hot seat.
We're going to segue into intimate time with Skip and Dr. Marv, and I've got 10 questions. We're going to be quick. I'm going to, and some of my questions aren't going to, that could take a long time. We won't have to elaborate too much. But again, for the listeners, we don't tell each other what the questions are. So you got to kind of come off the top of your head and you got to think. So it's kind of like the first thing that pops into your head.
The sweet music of love, we can no longer
Ready? I'm ready. Number 1, your mom arrives at the pearly gates, and to get into heaven, she has to honestly answer the question, who is your favorite child? What is her answer? I don't even know. Maybe you're an only child.
Well, I got a younger sister.
Oh, okay.
I think I slightly edge my sister out because of my personal story. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I think I barely edge her out. That's a brutal question.
Number 2, this one's a lot. It better be easier. Who's the best online trainer you know whose name rhymes with blip? It's
Dip.
limited. You're thinking of something. You're like, Chip?
yeah.
That one was kind of a setup.
Yeah,
we'll pass on that one. Anyway, number 3, your favorite TV series as a kid?
As a kid? Ooh. Chips.
Nice. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it might be just a good old boy. Some good old boys, never meaning no harm. I was asking myself, I'm like, I don't know what I would choose in that. Maybe Dukes of Hazzard. Anyway, number 4, kind of piggybacking off this. As quickly as you can, name your top 3 adult TV series of all time.
It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. That is why I have a fiance, because I use that as an excuse to spend time with her. Not even close. We're finishing up the newest season of Reacher, which I've been a huge fan of because I'm a Jack Reacher novel reader. So that's been great.
I don't think I've seen that.
What moved the needle? The first 2 seasons, greatest show ever. I gave up season 3. For All Mankind on Apple.
Oh.
The first 2 seasons, as good as it gets. The whole premise is the Soviet Union landed on the moon first. First 2 seasons, spectacular. Then that whole thing happened where people shut down. When they brought it back, I gave up within 5 episodes. I was like, I'm done. But the first 2 seasons of For All Mankind, as good as it gets.
Excellent. Number 5, an indecent proposal. Your wife, I always have to get something in here about your wife, right? Your wife has the opportunity to sleep with one of these 2 people for $1 million. Who does she choose? Justin Timberlake or George Clooney? Notice I made them 2 different ages.
Yeah. Probably Clooney.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Number 6, boxer's brief, commando or your wife's underwear. And it's important to note she already texted me the answer, so don't lie.
I'm a boxer briefs guy.
Number 7, how much is too much to pay for a watch for you?
Anything over $300.
Damn.
Because I get their True Wood. This is like $80. They're made of wood. I think they're nice. I accessorize with my glasses and my watches and my shoes. I used to be a big watch guy and drop lots of money, and now I have changed my tune. So this is good enough for me.
Gotcha. Number 8, when was the last time you wore a tie? That long for you too, huh?
Yeah.
I had to think when the last time was.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, it's our
I have
industry.
a ton of them.
Yeah,
I have a ton of them. I used to wear them all the time, but it's been a long time.
I always tell my wife I would love to have a job, right across the street where you can actually see the building in the back is Goldman Sachs. They're literally straight across all these hedge funds over here at 360 Rosemary.
You're that close to all the crooks.
Oh yeah, 25 years old, $6,000 suits. Just looking tight. I'm like, man, I'd like to dress up like that to go to work every day, but then I probably wouldn't. So they probably look over here and they're like, I don't know.
I want to do that.
Whatever he's doing over there with all those cats and everything, that looks like that might that might be a little less stressful.
Yeah.
All right, number 9, last book you read that was not related to the industry or your job.
It was a Clive Cussler fictional book. It's been a minute. I used to do a lot of reading. I need to get back to it.
Same here. I used to do a lot too, and then social media took up my reading time. Number 10, last question. Hottest woman on the planet? Can't say your wife. Pretend she's not listening.
God. I'm really bad at this because I don't
You're
pay
just saving
attention.
your ass right now in case she's listening.
I'm smart. I'm still trying to get out of the doghouse from the first round. Back in the day, Jessica Alba was pretty up there for me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't know names, so I'm terrible. Yeah.
I usually have this question on because I ask some fun questions at the end. I call it a kind of like a client profile for potential clients when they come on board to see if they have a sense of humor, and this is one of them. And sometimes I have to actually look up the people
Who they say.
Yeah, and I'll be like, oh, I've never heard of her before.
Yeah,
All right.
like I'm sure I'm gonna think of a name. I'll be like, that wasn't even close, but
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I came up with.
Well, you can come up with that name. You can give that name when your wife asks you and be like, what was this about? Who's this? Like, no, I gave the wrong answer. It's actually this person. Like, oh. All right, I'm going to hand it off to you then as we segue into the questions from the comment section. I think you have, 3?
We got 2, and then if we have time, we'll talk about a new topic. If not, we'll save it for a future episode.
Okay.
So this was a question, and remember, if you ask a question, you get entered into a drawing for an awesome shirt or sweatshirt or one of my courses. Side note, I just did another seminar this past weekend, and it will be turned into another online course, so you'll have options when the time comes. So Young Lee 357 asked, if someone had degenerative disc in the L5 S1 region, would there be a way to perform BFR training for that? Not saying I have one, it's just speculation, as I'm way weaker than I was in my 30s and 40s, and I am 1 inch shorter at age 51. Thank you, Skip and Dr. Marv. It's becoming my favorite show. So, degenerative disc disease, DDD, degenerative joint disease. First and foremost, it is gray hair of your bone and of spine. It's going to happen. Nobody's going to get through life without it. A lot of people use it as a sales tactic. It drives me up the fucking wall. It's going to happen if you live life. If you've had trauma, you live life on your terms, it might happen sooner, but nobody's getting through this life without some sort of degenerative joint disease changes. So keep that in mind, right? Imaging is not the end all be all. We've talked about this multiple times. I'm passionate about it because a lot of people will come in and somebody scare them out of their minds. Heaven forbid they're even doing line markings on x-ray from old school chiro. That really gets me going. But regardless, it's going to happen. Now, you couldn't obviously blood flow restrict your low back. It's got to be on a limb, but blood flow restriction has been shown to help people with, it's called a radiculopathy, where you are having nerve issues stemming from the spine going down, in particular with the quads. That BFR could help decrease pain, like we talked about, as well as increase strength and size and recruitment. So you could do blood flow restriction of the legs as a novel stimulus for hypertrophy and strength gains.
Interesting.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it actually has me thinking because I have nerve damage from shingles from 2004, roughly.
Mm-hmm. But that's going to be wrapping around your rib cage.
Yeah.
But so I'm talking about blood flow restricting, still doing the legs because he said he's weaker.
Yeah.
What happens on old bodybuilders? What goes first? The legs first, then usually the lats, usually the lower lats. So you would still just do blood flow restriction to your legs. Side note for your shingles, that dry needling technique I sent you, that works really, really well.
That too.
Yep. You could also do dry needling, hooking the needles up to a TENS unit so the needle is electrified. I do that a lot with my degenerative disc joint disease people, and that seems to help, and it could restore some function. So you've got a bunch of options, but don't let anybody scare you if you have loss of, disc height. That's going to happen.
Well, mine wasn't from any sort of back injury. It was just the shingles. And I get that dry needling work done once a week.
Yep.
And every now and then he'll ask me about it. He's like, you want me to play? And really where I am is I've had it for 20 years and I've just accepted it for what it is. Yep. It's not great, but I've lived with it this long that I'm like, I'm not going to mess with it.
Yep. So there's that. Then one other question, Meathead Medic. Ooh, I like that name. I didn't read it till just now. Another awesome episode. I look for blah, 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 blah. Skip, how did you like the dumbbell leg curl?
I used it to warm up. It took me a minute because, again, it was awkward because I have not done it for so long. And, of course, getting it set up right and getting myself positioned correctly and getting the dumbbell into place and stuff, it took a minute. But I do like it. So I'm going to continue to use it. I actually have train legs again tomorrow. I'm going to use it for hams to kind of warm up, again, activate and get everything even left to right and kind of open with it and then go from there. And I'm going to keep that in there pretty consistently, but I do like it. Still is taking some getting used to, though, for sure, to feel it out. Get the weight right because it feels too light to begin with. And then you get in there and then you're like, okay, it's a good thing I didn't go heavier.
Are you doing it like lying flat on the ground, or are you on a decline or
No,
an
I'm on a
incline
decline.
bench?
Essentially, I put
Which is way harder.
Yeah.
Way
I
harder.
put the
Yeah.
decline like sit-up machine as
Mhm.
low as it'll
Yep.
go. And
Yep.
then that way I can kind of, I'm towards
Gotcha.
the pads and I hang on and kind of
Yep.
do it that way. That way it's easier to drop the dumbbell and it's easier to pick up the dumbbell with my feet versus because I tried it on the flat first. I'm like, I can't do this. Like I can't hand the dumbbell to myself.
Yeah, I'm the opposite. I cannot stand doing it on a bench. Probably just because I was forced to do it during those lockdown workouts when I was in Cairo school.
Yeah.
So like I didn't have an option other than you better get really good at this, which I did. So those are the two questions. How are we on time? Do we want to bring up training around injury, or do we want to save that for another?
I think we're right about
episode?
an hour. Let's save it.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
it. So what we'll do is, for those who don't know, when I say I'm beat up, I am beat the bleep up. So we'll talk about how I work around my training injuries, how I help other people. Skip will talk about how he's worked around his injuries, because a lot of people go, "Oh, I'm hurt. I just can't train at all." I'm like, "Whoa,
Right.
whoa. Even if
Yeah.
your arm is in a cast, you could still do a hell of a lot of stuff, including training the opposite arm to help that broken arm heal quicker." So I think that would be a great topic for a near future episode then.
Yeah, I completely agree. The training through, I always laugh and say, if I didn't train every time I had an injury for the last 41 years, I
You would
wouldn't
have
have gotten
trained like
much.
what, a year?
Yeah, I wouldn't have
A
gotten
year.
much training done. And there's a lot to unwrap there because, of course, movement, even with an injury, I still consider it training. When I was rehabbing my legs, I had my leg day. It wasn't producing much growth, but it was leg training as far as, the psychology of it and trying to recover from that. So I did get some good hamstring development out of those years when I was unable to train quads very hard. So on that note, I'm gonna take us out, Dr. Marv. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell. It should sound a little something like this. And if you didn't like the show, just pretend you did. Like, subscribe, share, and ring the bell anyway. We want to hear your questions and your feedback about the show in the comments section. If we get good questions, we'll answer them during the next show. A new show drops every Tuesday, so that means roughly 4 shows per month. If your question is chosen to be answered on the show, you will go into a separate drawing. This is a new drawing. We're just giving away a bunch of stuff. It will randomly choose one winner at the end of each month who will receive, you ready? A 3-pound bag of Team Skip protein from TrueNutrition.com. If you have a topic or specific exercise you'd like us to discuss as a main topic on the show, let us know. Be sure to use the TrueNutrition.com link in the closing credits to save 10% on not just Team Skip protein, but every supplement they sell. Not only do I use my Team Skip protein with my clients, but other top prep guys have their clients use my protein because it's that good. Dr. Marv, how can people reach out to you with questions or if they want to hire you?
So I'm most active on Instagram, but my personal Instagram at dr.marvin.saysdc. My office is in Seabrook, Texas, i.e. Houston Bay area. I do telemedicine for all of Texas, nutrition coaching. I don't work one-on-one for bodybuilding coaching, so reach out to Skip. The educatedmeathead.com has a bunch of workout program options. I just had a lot of fun giving a squat prep paid seminar over the weekend, including the all-time world record holder did a panel Q&A afterwards. So that will be turned into an online course. So I'm going to do one each for squat, bench, and deads. So be on the lookout for that. And other than that, just let us know what we can do to help you all.
If you have too much skin, go to teamskip.com. You'll find all my contact information, including Team Skip merch. Of course, you can follow me on IG at Intense Muscle as well. And I want to note this. I'm gonna note this at the end of every show before we sign out. Keep in mind that this is a team of 3, not 2.
Yeah.
Chris is the man behind the scenes who's absolutely killing it with the visuals and graphics, and he also plays a huge role in the creative process. This project would not work without him. From all 3 of us, we thank you for the support and for tuning in to the show this week. Join us again next week for another episode of Between Two Dumbbells.